as Rabbeinu Hananel says at the very beginning of Maseches BEITZA, Aschil Maseches BEITZA be'ezras gadol ha'etza. Isn't that a beautiful poem? I shall begin the tractate of BEITZA with the help of the great of counsel. So it's always good to start a Maseches with a poem. Let's take a look at the Mishnah. Now, Maseches BEITZA, sometimes called Beya in yeshivas, is very intricate sometimes in its clarification of Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Yom Tov. So, unfortunately, using the DAF system, we can't go into a lot of the intricacies. And we're also basing ourselves on a lot of premises that we've already laid down in Maseches Shabbos. For example, Hilchos Muktzah. We understand that there's a concept called Muktzah, and we also have a premise that there's a machlokus between two great Tanoim, Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon, as to how far we go in Hilchos Muktzah. So much so that to the point where the Gemara in Shabbos says Reb Yehuda islay muktzah, Reb Yehuda holds of muktzah, Reb Shimon leslay muktzah. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muktzah. It doesn't mean that he doesn't hold of muktzah at all. There are certain kinds of muktzah that even Reb Shimon agrees to. However, he's much more liberal in the laws of muktzah. That's relevant for an opening for our Mishnah. BEITZA shenolda b'yom tov. An egg is laid on Yom Tov. Beis Shammai omrim te'achel, ubeis Hillel omrim lo se'achel. Beis Shammai say that the egg may be eaten, the egg is permitted, and Beis Hillel say the egg may not be eaten. Beis Shammai omrim, this is now, we're listing three machlokos between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where they are discussing laws of Yom Tov, and where Beis Shammai is more lenient than Beis Hillel, which is unusual. But these are the three. Next. Number two is Beis Shammai omrim sor b'kezayis v'chametz b'kikoseves u'Beis Hillel omrim zeh v'zeh b'kezayis. How much chametz do you have to consume in order to be liable for the Isser Kares, for eating chametz on Pesach? So Beis Shammai say when it comes to yeast itself, the leavening agent, you need to eat only a kezayis, but if you want to eat chametz like a piece of bread, you have to eat the size of a date. That's the shir of for Yom Kippur also, if you recall. However, Beis Hillel say zeh v'zeh b'kezayis, both eating yeast and consuming chametz itself like bread, all you need is a kezayis for either one. Another chumrah of Beis Hillel. And finally, number three, hashochet chayev ha'of b'yom tov, if you slaughter an animal which requires kisui hadam. The two types of animals which require kisui hadam is a chaya, an undomesticated non-farm animal like venison, a deer, or a bird, even a chicken. So you have to do the mitzvah of kisui hadam. The problem is that there may be something problematic with the earth. It may be muktzah, there may be other issues with it. And so Beis Shammai omrim yachbor bedeka v'yachase. Beis Shammai say, go right ahead, it's no problem, dig with a shovel and cover the blood. Ubeis Hillel omrim, and by the way, you're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov because you're allowed to do malachos that are for litzarach ochel nefesh, that are for eating. So this is one of those malachos that you're allowed to do on Yom Tov for eating. So Beis Hillel omrim lo yishchot ela im kein hayalo afar muchan mi ba'od yom. And Beis Hillel say, if you did not prepare earth from the day before for this purpose, lechatchila, you're not allowed to shecht. Umodim she'im shachat shiachra bedeka v'yachas. It's only b'diavad that if you've already slaughtered the animal and you don't have earth prepared from the day before, that you're allowed to use earth that has not been prepared and you can cover with it. And we'll have to try to understand the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. At face value, it seems to be having to do with something having to do with muktzah, and but we'll see. And finally, the last four words are a little bit cryptic. She'efer kira muchanhu. The Mishnah says that the ashes of an oven are considered to be prepared. What this is doing, it seems to be addressing the issue of kisei hadam, doing it possibly with ash instead of earth. But the Gemara will address these last four words as well. But for today's discussion, we're only going to be discussing the egg, the chicken and the egg. And well, that'll be what comes first today. B'mai askinan. So the Gemara's question is, what are we dealing with here? The question is like this. If this chicken has been already designated for food, that this is a slaughtering chicken, it's a chicken that you plan to use to slaughter it and eat it, and then before you have a chance to slaughter it, you discovered that it's laid an egg. Well, the Gemara says, what should be the problem? An egg is something that's separated from the unit of this chicken. The chicken had already been designated as a food item, so it's not muktzah. So anything that comes out of it should also be non-muktzah. So what could possibly be the problem with this egg? Ella b'tarnagolas homedes legadol BEITZA ma'ita ma'yod beishamai muktzah. And if you're going to tell me that it's a chicken that has been precluded for laying eggs, then why would Beis Shammai permit you to have that egg? This, after all, is a muktzah chicken, and therefore whatever comes out of it is muktzah. This is something that is unanticipated. It was not prepared from before Yontif. It was not designated. It was not, and it's therefore muktzah, right? So why would you be allowed to use the egg, according to Beis Shammai? So frek the Gemara umay kushya. I don't understand why you're even asking this question. Dilma Beis Shammai les lehu muktzah. Maybe Beis Shammai is liberal and don't hold of the laws of muktzah like Reb Shimon that we saw in Masechah Shabbos. We do have a variety of opinions vis-a-vis muktzah. So what if someone says that you're allowed to have a muktzah egg? That shouldn't be so surprising to you. The Gemara says kasal kadaitin afilu man deshari b'muktzah b'nolad osar, and therefore my tamayu de Beis Shammai. Our thinking is that even if you are liberal with the laws of muktzah, you're going to be machmir with the laws of nolad. Nolad is like a super muktzah. What do we mean by that? Normally, when something is muktzah, it exists within my purview, but I haven't designated it for use for Yontif or Shabbos, and that's why we call it muktzah. However, or it's been precluded from my use for whatever reason. Let's say it's something that is a valuable knife that I only use for my industrial needs, and I wouldn't therefore use it for opening up walnuts on Shabbos. That's why it would be called muktzah, but at least it exists. I know about it. But here an egg is newly created. It's something that didn't even exist, at least not in my world. It didn't exist. It may have existed inside the womb, but I was totally oblivious to it. So that's what's called nolad. And therefore, our thinking is that even if you're liberal by the laws of muktzah, you're going to be machmir with nolad. And that's why we can't understand, why would Beis Shammai permit the egg?
We don't have Rav Shimon on nolad in Shabbos, right? No mention.
I don't remember. You'd have to go through Gans Masechah Shabbos. I really don't remember the discussion of nolad in Shabbos. I'm sure it's there somewhere. Amar of Nachman la'olam b'tarnagolis homedes legadol beitzim ude islay muktzah islay nolad ude leslay muktzah leslay nolad. So Rav Nachman comes up with the solution. We're going to see 4 different solutions today as to what kind of egg and what kind of chicken our Mishnah is talking about. Rav Nachman says we're talking about an egg-laying chicken, so the chicken is muktzah, and the egg is muktzah. However, if you don't hold of the laws of muktzah because you're liberal with muktzah, you'll be liberal with nolad too. And if just like you can use the chicken, even though it's been designated for egg laying and not for eating, you can use the egg as well. Beis Shammai Reb Shimon u Beis Hillel Reb Yehuda. Beis Shammai holds like Reb Shimon, and Beis Hillel holds like Reb Yehuda, who's more machmir with muktzah. Frek the Gemara, mi omer Rav Nachman hachi. How can you tell me that Rav Nachman is assigning these shitas to Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai? V'hatnan Beis Shammai omrim magbin me'al hashulchan atzamusu klipin u Beis Hillel omrim misalek hasatav l'kula menara. We have a Mishnah which states as follows. The Mishnah in Masechah Shabbos is talking about shells of nuts and bones of a piece of chicken or a piece of steak that you have left over after you've eaten. There's an issue of muktzah here because there's no food attached left to this bone or these shells. They have no use, they're not a kli, they're not a food, so therefore they have a stigma of muktzah attached to them. How are you supposed to get them off your table? So Beis Shammai say that what you're supposed to do is just pick them up normally. Don't worry about it. Since they were part of a food, they're not considered muktzah, you don't have to deal with it at all. Beis Hillel say, no, you can't handle the shells and the bones directly. You have to put them on a plate and only lift up the plate in order to dispose of the bones and the shells. Va'amar Rav Nachman, anu ein lanu ela Beis Shammai Reb Yehuda, Beis Hillel Reb Shimon. Rav Nachman, when he heard this Mishnah, he said, I need to clarify. You got the opinions mixed up. It's not that Beis Shammai is lenient and Beis Hillel is machmir, but no. We always know that when it comes to the laws of muktzah, Beis Hillel is lenient like Reb Shimon. and Beis Shammai is the one who's machmir like Rabbi Yehuda. So you see very clearly over here that Rav Nachman, when it comes to the shells and the bones, says that Beis Hillel holds like Reb Shimon, who is liberal in the laws of muktzah. How can the very same Rav Nachman say that Beis Hillel, who prohibits the egg, is doing so because Beis Hillel holds like Rabbi Yehuda? It's mamish just opposites. Amar l'cha Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman will tell you as follows. Gabe Shabbos desasam lantana ka Rabbi Shimon. He says there's a fundamental difference between Hilchas Shabbos and Hilchas Yom Tov. As we're going to see, we're more lenient with laws of muktzah on Shabbos, and we're more machmir with the laws of muktzah on Yom Tov. Why, we'll see in a moment. So when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, where we have an indication from the Mishnah, that the Mishnah lists a halacha without attribution. That's called a stam Mishnah. A Mishnah without any attribution of authorship is called a stam Mishnah, which means that it's speaking with authority. And therefore, the stam Mishnah in Masechah Shabbos goes like Reb Shimon, Ditnan mechaschin es hadluin lifnei habehema ves hanavela lifnei haklavim. As we learned in a Mishnah in Masechah Shabbos, that you're allowed to cut up melons and feed them to your animal, even though they've normally been precluded for human use. Plus, you're allowed to take an animal that died on Shabbos and cut it up and feed it to your dogs. It's carrion, you can't use it anymore. You can cut it up and give it to your dogs, even though you could argue that it was muktzah. You weren't planning to use this for your dogs on Shabbos. Nevertheless, it's permitted. And this is a stam Mishnah, which means that it's coming with the authority of the halacha. And it seems to be going like Reb Shimon, and therefore mukim lo beis Hillel ka Reb Shimon. And therefore, vis-a-vis Hilchas Shabbos, we'll say that Beis Hillel paskins like Reb Shimon. Avol gabi Yom Tov desasam lantana ka Rabbi Yehuda. But when it comes to Hilchas Yom Tov, where the Stam Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda, ditnan ein mevakin eitzim min hakoros v'lo min hakorosh nishbara b'Yom Tov. That let's say you have a beam that's used for construction purposes, like a 2x4, and you want to cut it up and use it for firewood. Or let's say you have a 2x4 that broke on Yom Tov and you want to use it now for fire because you got no other use for it. That you're not allowed to do because of problems with muktzah. So you see that the Stam Mishnah in Hilchas Shabbos goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore mukim lo Beis Hillel ka Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore Beis Hillel will go like Rabbi Yehuda in regard to Hilchas Yom Tov. So this is very bizarre. So basically, what the Gemara is saying is that you can have Tanoim like the authors of the Mishnah and like Beis Hillel, who will paskin liberally in Hilchas Shabbos as far as muktzah is concerned, and will paskin stringently in Hilchas Muktzah on Yom Tov. Why would that be? So the Gemara is going to ask this as a question. The Gemara is going to say, Mechte, Man stame lamas nisin. Who was the author who decided when to give attribution and when to author the Mishnah anonymously? That's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. It's one man. It's one man who decided when the Mishnah speaks authoritatively without attribution, and when you say so-and-so says. Ma'ishna b'Shabbos desasam lan ka Reb Shimon, ma'ishna b'Yom Tov desasam lan ka Rabbi Yehuda. Did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi have a lapse? Did he have a split personality? Why would he paskin to be machmir in laws of muktzah in Hilchas Yom Tov and to be liberal in Hilchas Muktzah on Shabbos? Be consistent. Answers the Gemara. Amri Shabbos de Chamira v'lo asi l'zilzulei ba'asasam lan ka Rabbi Shimon de Mekel. Yom Tov de Kil v'asi l'zilzulei ba'asasam lan ka Rabbi Yehuda de Machmir. Gemara says it's very simple. From a conceptual point of view, there's more reason to be machmir with the laws of muktzah on Yom Tov than there is on Shabbos. Why? Because Yom Tov has certain aspects of leniency built into it biblically. Number one, certain malachas are permitted on Yom Tov. Malachas ochel nefesh. So you're allowed to cook, you're allowed to slaughter. Number two, the penalty for violation of Yom Tov is much more lenient. You only get lashes if you violate Yom Tov. For Shabbos, you get the death penalty if you're over at B'mezid. So there's much more of a propensity for a person to take liberties with Hilchas Yom Tov than there is with Hilchas Shabbos. Many times Chachamim stepped into situations where they saw that people were going to be taking liberties, and they clamped down. So they clamped down in Hilchas Yom Tov and were more machmir with muktzah than by Shabbos, where number one, no malacha is permitted, and number two, the penalty for violation is the death penalty, so we're not worried that people are going to take liberties. So the Gemara now says, okay, fine. Now Rav Nachman makes a lot of sense. In Hilchas Yantif, Beis Hillel is machmir and says that the egg is prohibited. In Hilchas Shabbos, Beis Hillel is mekel like Rav Shimon and says that it's no problem to handle the shells and the bones directly, it's perfectly fine. But the Gemara says, okay, but wait a minute. B'mayu kimta b'tarnagolos hamedes legadol beitzim u'mishum muktzah. Rav Nachman, 1 second. You're telling me now that our mission is talking about an egg-laying hen, and the egg is prohibited because of muktzah, because just like the mother hen was not prepared and was muktzah, so too the egg that comes out of it is muktzah as well. Why are you talking about an egg? Talk about the chicken. The chicken comes before the egg. So why not talk about the more basic issue, is the chicken muktzah or not? So, or is chicken mutter on Yontif or not? So the Gemara answers, Lo diacha kochan de Beis Shammai de benolad shari. It's to tell you how far Beis Shammai are lenient. It's one thing to tell me that Beis Hillel are machmir, but I want to tell you, you know how mekel Beis Shammai are? Not only are Beis Shammai mekel to permit you to have the egg-laying hen on Yontif, but they even go so far as to say that a nolad product of that hen is also mutter, even though it wasn't in existence before Yontif, that I could set it aside. Frek the Gemara v'liflugi b'tarnagolas lo diacha kochan de Beis Hillel de mumuksa asri. But the Gemara says, why did you choose to side with Beis Shammai to say how far Beis Shammai is lenient? Why don't you say how far Beis Hillel is machmer? Not only do they asr the egg, but they even asr the chicken. The Gemara answers, V'chitei makoach dehetera adif. Maybe you'll tell me the general principle of koach dehetera adif. It's always better to accentuate and clarify how far the lenient position goes, because that always carries more authority. Let me explain. Rashi, this is a very important Rashi to see. Rashi says, Koach dehetera adifle. You see that Rashi? Tov lo lahashmi'enu koach divrei hamatir. It is more important for the Tana to tell us how far the lenient position goes. Shuhu somech al shmuaso ve'enu yorei lahatir. Listen to that beautiful language. A person who gives instructions to be lenient is relying upon a tradition that he has for leniency and is not scared to offer a heter. Avol kasa osrin ain't a raya, but just because a person is machmir, that doesn't show any level of scholarship or erudition, because shakol yecholon lahachmir v'afilu b'davar hamuter. Anyone can paskin aser. That's easy. You see, anyone can say something's aser. So that doesn't indicate the importance of the individual just because he comes down and he slams his fist down on the table and he says it's aser. That's not a sign of godless, that's a sign of katnus, right? The godless is a person who can say it's mutter in the face of other people who say aser. Okay, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Anyway, so the Gemara now says, so maybe you'll tell me that that's the reason why the Mishnah accentuates how far Beis Shammai is mekel. But wait a minute, says the Gemara, v'niflog bitter avayu. But nevertheless, the Mishnah could have easily told me the two sides, how far Beis Hillel is machmir and how far Beis Shammai is mekel. It could have done that so easily. Why specifically focus on the egg? Talk about both. V'niflog b'tarnagolas homedes legadol beitzim hu BEITZA Beis Shammai omrim te'achel Beis Hillel lo se'achel. Talk about a topic like this. Say an egg-laying hen that lays an egg on Yontif. Beis Shammai say both the chicken and the egg are permitted, and Beis Hillel say both the chicken and the egg are prohibited. That would have been so simple for you to clarify. Why'd you have to leave it to our imagination? So Ella Amar Rabbi. So based on the force of that question, Rabbi says that's not. I don't agree with Rav Nachman. I hold that the pshat of our Mishnah is la'olam b'tarnagolos haomedes la'achila uv'yom tov shechalios achar haShabbos askinan. Rabbi says the issue over here is not muktzah of the chicken. The chicken is perfectly non-muktzah because it was set aside for shechita. It's prepared. The issue is only the egg and not the chicken. The chicken is fine. You want to shech the chicken on Yontif, no problem. The problem is the egg. The issue that we're dealing with here is when Yontif falls out on a Sunday. When Yontif falls out on a Sunday, the day before Yontif is Shabbos, umishum hachana. And there's a biblical requirement that anything that you're going to use on Yontif has to be prepared on a weekday before. we require that there be a certain chashivus that you give to the yantiv. And in order to give chashivus to the yantiv meals, importance to the yantiv meals, preparations for that have to take place on a day before, where you can focus all of your attention on the yantiv preparations. And if the day is Shabbos, you're not going to be able to focus your attention on yantiv preparations. The Torah requires you to prepare on a Friday that's a weekday for Shabbos, and it requires you to prepare on a weekday for yantiv. If you prepare on a Shabbos for yantiv, that's no good. Whatever you prepare is not usable. Ukasava Rabba called BEITZA de misyalda ha'idna me'esmol gamrola. And Rabbi is of the opinion that when an egg is laid today, it means that its preparation, its gestation took place yesterday. And therefore, because when Yantav falls out on a Sunday, the egg was formed on a Shabbos, it was prepared on a Shabbos, you cannot use the egg on Yantav because it lacks the requirement to be prepared on a weekday. V'Rabba l'taime, and Rabba is consistent. Amar Rabba ma'idich v'hayabayom hashishi v'hechinu eis asher yaviu. The Torah in Parshas B'Shalach, which talks about the mun, it says that it shall be on Friday that they shall prepare that which the mun which they need to use on Shabbos. And from there, Rabbi said, "Chol meichin l'Shabbos v'chol meichin l'Yom Tov ve'en Yom Tov meichin l'Shabbos ve'en Shabbos meichin l'Yom Tov." That you need to have a weekday, which is the word Yom Hashishi, typically is a weekday, and therefore you need a weekday to prepare for Shabbos and to prepare for Yom Tov. But you cannot prepare on Shabbos for Yom Tov, and you cannot prepare on Yom Tov for Shabbos. And whatever you do prepare cannot be used on the following day because it lacks that biblical requirement of vehechinu eis asher yaviu.
How can you say the person prepared the egg? The egg's in the chicken.
Correct.
Does that have to do with the person?
So it's not. So therefore, the subject is not the person. It's the topic is the preparation. Any food item that is going to be used on Yantiv has to be prepared on a weekday before. Even it's the mun. Who prepared the mun? We didn't prepare the mun. The mun fell on its own. The point is that it has to be in existence and it has to be within our purview from the day before on Yom Hashishi. So that's what Rabbi says you see from the mun. So Amar le Abaye ela me'ata Yom Tov be'alma tishtari. So Abaye says, according to what you're saying, the only time the egg should be prohibited is on a Sunday, that a Yom Tov Sunday. But what if Yom Tov falls out on a Tuesday? The egg should be permitted. Why does the Mishnah not distinguish between Yom Tov on a Sunday and Yom Tov on a Tuesday? The Gemara answer is Gezerah mishum Yom Tov acher HaShabbos. The answer is because Chazal made an across-the-board gezerah. Biblically, it's only the egg is only prohibited when Yom Tov is on a Sunday. But Chazal said we're going to prohibit on all Yomim Tovim when an egg is laid on Yom Tov, even when the egg is laid on a Tuesday Yom Tov. The Gemara now says Shabbos the Alma Tishtari, and the same argument we could make is when an egg is laid on Shabbos, as long as Yom Tov there was not a Friday Yom Tov before it should be permitted. Same answer. Gezerah mishum Shabbos acher Yom Tov. The answer is that any time an egg is laid on Shabbos, we prohibit it always, even when Friday was a regular weekday, because of situations where Friday will coincide with Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, Umikas Rinan, since when do you see that Chazal makes such a gezerah that we're going to aser on every Yom Tov because of an egg that's laid on Sunday Yom Tov? V'hatanya, look at the following brisa. The brisa says that if a person slaughters a chicken and he finds in this chicken ova eggs. You know what ova eggs are? They're eggs that are still attached to the animal to the chicken. They haven't been laid yet, but they're formed. They're getting ready to be laid. So there's a lot of interesting halachas about ova eggs. They have a din of being fleishich, for example. You have to be careful with ova eggs. But the bottom line is that these are permitted, even though there would be definitely a reason to aser those eggs, because if we aser eggs on a Sunday Yantif because we aser eggs on a Sunday Yantif because of a biblical prohibition that they were prepared on Shabbos. And now you're telling me that we make gezerahs on all eggs, even when Yantif falls out on a Tuesday. So then let's make a gezerah over here too. If you shecht a chicken on a Sunday Yantif and you find eggs inside, you should say that to make a gezerah, even though this is really still part of the chicken, but make a gezerah that we're going to aser these ova eggs lest you come to take regular eggs. But you see that we don't make gezerahs on eggs based on a biblical prohibition. So that's the Gemara's question. If we're not being gozer over here, why should we be gozer on a yontif that falls out on a Tuesday to asr the egg?
Maybe it's different because it's still attached, like the liver and like the other parts that one can eat.
Yeah, the egg is clearly permissible, Alan. That's the issue. The egg is permissible midioraisa because it's still attached and it's still part of the chicken. But we're saying like this: let's make a gezerah, just like we make a gezerah on eggs that are hatched on a Tuesday yontif. Because of eggs that are laid because of eggs that are laid on a Sunday yontif, we should also make a gezerah on ova eggs, lest that are discovered on a Sunday yontif, lest you come to eat laid eggs on a Sunday yontif. It's the same principle. Make a gezerah by extension, right? So the Gemara says. So Amarleis, the answer is BEITZA gemuros b'mei'iman milsa de lo shchicha or milsa de lo shchicha lo gozru barabanan. That's not a common occurrence to slaughter a chicken and find ova eggs inside, and because it's not common, the Chachamim did not see fit to make a gezerah. But but an egg that's laid on a Tuesday yontif, that is a common occurrence, and therefore Chazal felt it appropriate to attach a gezerah to it, lest you come to be matir eggs that are laid on a Sunday yontif. So now we've seen two reasons. Reason number one is Rav Nachman, who says that we're talking about an egg-laying chicken, and the egg is muktzah, and it's even worse than muktzah, it's noilad, and that's why Beis Shammai is mekel because they don't hold of muktzah, Beis Hillel is machmir because they hold of muktzah. Now we have reason number two, which is Rabbi. Rabbi says that there's a biblical requirement of hachana, and because on a Sunday yontif, when the egg is laid, it was prepared on Shabbos and not a weekday, that egg is aser. Hu hadin, on all yontifs, even when yontif is on a Tuesday, we aser it mishum gezerah, because of a Sunday yontif. Let's see two more very quick reasons. Rav Yosef Omar gezerah mishum peras hanoshrim. Rav Yosef says the rabbis prohibited the egg even though it's from a chicken meant for slaughter. So there's clearly no issue of muktzah, and they don't hold of the problem of hachana. That's only according to Rabbi, but there's a separate issue. If we were to permit you to have this egg, you would come to permit fruit that falls off a tree. Now, fruit that falls off a tree is technically permitted, but the rabbis forbade it lest you come to pluck fruit off a tree. Okay? Lest you come to pluck fruit off the tree. So therefore, Amarle, and therefore the same thing is that this egg that emanates from the chicken is like fruit falling off a tree and conceptually. So therefore, we forbid you to take the egg lest you come to take fruit that is peros hanoshrin, fruit that fell off a tree. Amarle Abaye, wait a minute, peros hanoshrin time of my gzera shemayala v'yidlo shigufa gzera vananikom v'nigzer gzera l'gzera. The Gemara says, I don't understand, Abaye. How can you tell me that the issue is lest you come to eat fruit that fell off a tree? Fruit that fell off a tree in itself is only an Isser D'Rabbanan, lest you come to pluck. So you're telling me that I attach a secondary gezerah on top of that, and I say now you can't even have an egg that comes out of a chicken lest you come to eat fruit that fell off a tree, which is only prohibited lest you come to pluck? That's what's called the gzera l'gzera. It's so remote that it becomes meaningless, and the rabbis don't do that. So the Gemara says, kula chada gzerahi. No, really it was all part of the original gezerah. When the rabbis forbade fruit that fell off a tree, they also forbade anything that was akin to it, including the egg. So really, the egg is aser lest you come to pluck fruit off a tree. That's really the prohibition. And finally, we see the reason of Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Gezerah Mishum Mashkin Shazavu. Rabbi Yitzchak, very similar to Rabbi Yosef, he says the issue is not because lest you come to eat fruit that fell off a tree, but rather lest you come to drink juice that flowed from a fruit. If you discover on Shabbos or Yontif, you have an orange on a plate, and all of a sudden you discover that the juice flowed out of this orange on its own, Chazal made a gezerah that you're not allowed to drink the juice, because if we let you drink the juice, you may be tempted to squeeze the fruit, which is a malacha of schita, that you're not allowed to do. So therefore they said also that if an egg comes out of a chicken on Yontif, that may cause you to drink juice that flowed on its own out of a fruit, and therefore you'll come to squeeze. So that's all, the whole reason that juice flowing out of a fruit is prohibited is because you may come and squeeze the fruit. So once again, it's a ridiculous extension. The whole reason that it's the fruit that flows, the juice that flows out is prohibited is because you may come to squeeze. So then you're going to tell me and attach on top of that an additional gezerah to prohibit also an egg that flows out of a chicken lest you come to drink the juice, which is only prohibited lest you come to squeeze. It's too remote. So the Gemara answer is kula chada gezerah. Same answer that it's really was all part of the original gezerah. When Chazal forbade juice that flows out of a fruit, concomitantly with that, they answered also anything that is like that, and they prohibited eggs that flow out of a chicken lest you come to squeeze the fruit on Shabbos. And that's where we'll hold it for today. We've got 4 reasons in total. Have a wonderful day.